Cecilia, welcome to Taking Care of Business. For those of you that don't know, even though it's hard not to know because you are everywhere on LinkedIn, Cecilia is the Chief Commercial Officer for Aldar Developments.
Welcome to me.
Welcome to you. And thank you for joining me on a Friday afternoon.
Yes.
I have to ask this. How did you first get into the real estate industry in Dubai?
Yeah, and it's funny because today I focus in Abu Dhabi, right? But it started in Dubai. That was the year of 2004.
A long time ago.
And so that was obviously not my background. I moved to the UAE in 2002. Fell in love with the nothingness.
It was definitely nothing back then.
Yes, there was nothing, but, a lot of potential. And I came from a different background, marketing, FMCG. That didn't work very well. and then I stumbled into, at that time, became a business partner. And he was setting up a small boutique brokerage. I thought that was a good idea. So off we went.
I like it. Do you feel, even though you stumbled, as you said, that you found your passion now? Like real estate is the passion.
I think it's not so much real estate. My passion, I think sales is my passion.
Okay.
And I think it doesn't matter which industry it is. I just love it.
Okay. What do you think really for you has contributed to your success? If we rewind back, you said obviously it wasn't just real estate, it's sales generally. But what do you think has contributed to you personally?
If success is a big word, right? I don't think we were talking about it earlier. I don't think it defines you necessarily because it's as long as you are building your dream, and where you want to be and having clarity. Because a lot of people focus sometimes on titles, which are borrowed, or you focus on the money. This is all very temporary, right?
Yeah.
So I think working sales gives you a lot of tools that you not necessarily get on other industries, right? Rejection, long hours.
Yeah.
And I think I always tell the guys, like, if you can break into sales, you probably, do very well in other industries as well. So I think that base of dealing with people and relationship building is what makes you, I call it successful when it comes to an industry point of view.
So would you say that where you are now is not necessarily by design? You didn't plan, but you do things which make you happy or bring you joy. And actually for you, success is not reaching a certain level within a company or having those achievements, but more so doing something which puts a smile on your face.
Yeah, and I think that's it, right? I think if you can get up in the morning and whatever you do, you feel happy about it, that's the winning. I think that's the success. This is more important than what you get paid. Of course, we need to live, you have ambitions, but like if you are trapped doing something that you're not happy when you wake up in the morning, like you have to change.
And would you say then, if we rewind back through your career and life generally, have there been moments in your life where you've not wanted to get out of bed in the morning and therefore you've changed or pivoted into a different direction?
Yeah, many times. I think when you run a brokerage, it's quite challenging dealing with people. And that's a difference, right? Because when you start in sales, it doesn't mean as you grow your career, you're going to be a good manager necessarily, or you have the patience. I say this all the time. I'm from Brazil, right? A good footballer doesn't make a good coach necessarily, right?
True, yes.
So I think it's I had to have different hats at different moments in time when I was building my brokerage, from selling myself to crisis where suddenly it doesn't matter your title on the door anymore. You need to get things to work. So I think every time I was out of the sales game is probably where I was not happy, because I probably prefer to spend more time building my own things than necessarily being behind the scenes, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get that. Would you say one of your motivators then is actually being under pressure? Because let's face it, sales, regardless of what you're selling, there's a pressure.
Yeah, the pressure it comes down to self-awareness, right? When you have clear goals and you know where you're going, you will deal pressure in a much different way, or get less emotional attached to the no's and to the situations you go through life. So pressure is good. I don't have an issue with pressure. And I think anybody say you cannot have an issue with pressure because, again, you're not going to succeed otherwise.
So I talked about this actually on a video earlier on, and I don't know whether we can go here, but I'm going to try it. You've just talked about rejection just then and having to come to terms with rejection. We talk about first impressions, also super important in sales.
Yeah.
Follow-up, also super important to sales. There's a lot of similarities between sales and dating. Would you agree?
Oh, God. Yeah, I suppose it's a process, right? So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You agree or not? You can be controversial.
No, it's not about controversial. I think, building a relationship, which is a love relationship, starts with the process, right? Again, when I talk to the team and we are talking about sales, I always refer to, the kids when they have that, these little drawings that you have to connect 1, 2, and 3 to have the final, so you can see what the drawing is.
Dot to dot type things, yeah.
Right. That's it for me, right? So whether in a relationship or you are in sales, you can't jump the process, right? You have to connect 1 to 2 to 3 so you can see the full picture. What typically people do is go from 1 to 10 and 10 to 20 and then thing gets lost, right?
Yeah, and then you don't have the finished picture.
No.
So actually keeping with that analogy, do you find the way that you've generally approached your career or your life is that you will connect the dots, so to speak. You see the bigger picture. And once you see that picture, you go, okay, complete. Now on to the next picture, so to speak.
You have to. I think every time I try to cut corners, it never works. And it doesn't work.
So actually, you're not biggest, but one of your key pieces of advice then is don't rush the process. The process is the process.
The process is the most important thing. It doesn't matter if you're running a company, right? You're not going to get your software right if you don't put the process in place. And the same with sales, right? It's not going to work if you wake up in the morning, you don't have a plan, you don't have a follow-up process in the morning with your customers, and then in the after. Like if you don't have your days and your weeks figured out in advance, you are leaving everything for luck. And I know a lot of people are riding on the benefit of the market. It's been very good for the last few years, but it doesn't stay forever. Not here, anywhere. It's a cycle. So I think that's where you get the separation of the winners and the people that stay behind because they are not prepared with their processes. I
totally agree. I learned something from a very young age from one of my mentors, and he said, keep doing the basics and the results will follow.
Yeah.
And it kind of is in layman's terms what you've just said there, follow the process. What I tend to find in a market that we find ourselves in now, which is good, right? You can put a property on the market, it's going to sell, there's a lot of interest. That's great when it's a good market. But when the market effectively changes, which there could be, you never know, up, down, in, out, who knows? What I find separates a really good salesperson or a really good brokerage is their ability to keep following the basics. Because it's easy when there is a good market for us to go, we don't need to prospect anymore because we've got so much business and it's abundant.
They're not building pipeline,
And the pipeline dries up. Lo and behold, the market changes, and then what do? You're back to square one. Let's just keep with you on this final question then.
But that's why.
Go for it.
That's why, and it's an important point. From a brokerage point of view, from a business point of view, I find that the agencies that kind of enforce a structured approach will have a much better success than the agencies they approach by bringing people in, here's your desk, here's your phone, off you go. People need structure. Just like babies, right? When you, a lot of people don't have kids, but if you have kids, if you don't put them in a routine every day, they're not going to be happy babies, right? Yeah. So routine is the most important thing for a successful business.
Well, if I would probably say then, it's one of the reasons that Allsop and Allsop have enjoyed as much success as they have, because we do have that structure. We do have work timings and annual leave entitlement and codes of conduct and employment contracts.
You have to.
Absolutely, you have to. But again, with some of the newer agencies I've seen come to the market, and bear in mind, I've been recruiting in this industry now for 10 years here in Dubai, you see a lot of, it's okay, you know what you're doing, so you can have the flexibility. Yeah. Some people, a very small percentage, will have the ability to self-motivate and know what they're doing. They don't need any attention. But even the most successful people sometimes need Cecilia, are you okay? Do you need a check-in?
Yeah.
You've not aced on this KPI or that KPI. I've not seen you all week. Where have you been? So I think it's nice that you do recognise that actually structure is important in a successful business. You've answered the question I was going to ask, so we'll move on. And I'm actually going to talk about new agents to the marketplace. And before I do that, there was a statistic that came out recently that said there were 1,000 new people moving to Dubai daily. Before we go through the rest of the podcast, let's unpack that. 1,000 people. What do you make of that?
It's just, since COVID, we've been saying this over in the last few years, that the negative myth that people had about the UAE has vanished. The way the UAE behaved when it comes to policies and processes for dealing with COVID, it was first class. A lot of people saw that as with a different light than from previous, I would say, cycles.
Agreed.
The way the implementation of new policies, whether it's for golden visa, whether it's for easy to do business, obviously real estate, obviously tax is an important point as well.
Yep.
Is all driving traffic to the UAE. We've been witnessing this over the last 2 years at least, at a pace that is, again, unprecedented. And I don't think we'll stop. I think combined, we have other countries as well who are not necessarily managing its own people's expectations. There's a lot of politics. And why not? This is the place to be right now. And I think we'll continue to be for the rest of the years.
I couldn't agree more. There's definitely been a paradigm shift for sure. And it's been nice to witness over the time that I've actually lived here. But of course, with that many people coming to Dubai, aside from the roads being busier and the malls being busier, that's a good thing for business. How does a new agent thinking that they would like to embark on their journey in Dubai real estate, how do they stand out?
It's not easy, but I think it needs to start from within. And that starts with accountability.
Nice word. I like it.
It is. And you know what? That's my favorite word in the whole world. and the reason is, and I learned from my own mistakes, right? Accountability for me means you just make everything your own fault. And again, in sales, people tend to, they join a company, they don't want to follow the process, they think they already know things, they think they know all. And when things start to not work, they start to blame the business. I didn't get enough leads. The leads were not good enough. It was raining. The buyer, you go back to the drawing. Let's go back to the dots, right? Yeah. If you don't go one by one and follow the advice, if you join a good company, you're not going to succeed.
Yeah.
And the minute you start to blame yourself when things don't go your way is also the quickest for you to get back on the horse and keep going.
I totally agree. It's the blame game, right? But the last place that somebody's prepared to blame is looking at themselves in the mirror and go,
absolutely.
you didn't work hard enough. Yeah. And I think in a commission-only role, which often real estate roles are, if you aren't self-critical on yourself, and not to the point where you're bashing yourself every day. You don't want that for sure. You need to maintain a level of confidence. Yeah. But if you're not showing up and you're not doing everything to the best of your ability every day, that's on you, not on the company or the country or the economy or anything of that sort. You started the answer with, it has to come from within.
Yep.
I actually believe that personal branding, it's been a buzz phrase, right? What is a personal brand? And we'll get to that in a second. But how important do you think it is for a new agent coming to Dubai or real estate in the UAE generally to commence a personal brand? Do you think it's a necessity? Do you think it's a nice to have?
That's an interesting one because if it was 15 years ago, I would say you have to be on the phone, you have to make 100 calls, but we know that's not allowed. And the way people are sourcing data is obviously not allowed. So therefore, that option is not there, even though everybody still do it because I do get a lot of calls. But the reality is that is not sustainable because where 15 years ago, an owner would get one call once a month, probably not too bothered about it, to now getting literally 100 calls a day. It just becomes, there is no way you're going to build a relationship. And don't take me wrong, you might get the odd customer who say, okay, I'll give you my listing. You get some quick wins, but that's not sustainable. if you're not with that phone and talking to people and representing what you believe and sharing that to the world, again, I have friends, I said this on my podcast before. I have a friend who is a very well-known lawyer, and 60% of his business comes from Instagram and TikTok.
60%?
Yeah.
Wow.
Lawyer, right? And basically, there's nothing fancy about what he does. He just put content that people want to hear.
Yep.
And it goes back to what I said about self-awareness. The problem is people too worry about the hair, how they look. They worry about the phone, and I don't have the perfect makeup. Or if you're a guy, like, I'm too shy. And it doesn't mean you have to go on video, right? Maybe you're good in writing. Maybe you can start to do a blog or create a community with your tenants that you rent and start to communicate. But you have to put yourself out there, because you're never going to reach highs if people don't know who you are. And the most important part, and that's where, makes me laugh sometimes, it's free.
Yeah. But it starts. Case closed, podcast finished. Yes, I like that. But it starts from within. And we've just said that sometimes an agent, their fall from their career is because they don't try hard enough.
Yeah.
And so actually, when you're saying, okay, come on, get out there and do something for free and speak to the world and tell them what you do to try and generate business, they might not be motivated to do it. Right.
I think the issue, it comes to consistency, right? Because everything you do in life, you need to repeat. And you need to understand it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So you're not going to do 30 days of content. Suddenly you're going to be the king of, Jamaica Gulf States. You will not. So people need to look at that with a long-term view. Is one lead to the second lead, to the third lead, and the consistency. Because again, the algorithm and the way TikTok and Instagram works keeps changing. So you need to figure out, you need to A/B test. Maybe one day I do 2 pieces of content. So I'll try the first one, doesn't work, I delete, I do something else. So you have to have a passion for it. Today, you do have, again, the advantage of a lot of online tools that you can schedule content. Because I think the challenge is, it's 3:00, I was busy, I forgot to do the post. Yeah. So you can pay little money for softwares. You can, take once a week, make all your content and just make sure it got posted, So it requires work. It's not going to be resolving, you're not going to have instant success.
But everything that gives reward requires a level of input, for sure, right?
100%.
So you mentioned earlier on about personal brand and it starting from within.
Yeah.
And I think that plays nicely into being authentic. You said earlier on, sometimes guys might be shy, girls might say their hair's not quite right, etc. I battled with my own demons to not post on social media because I was worried that people might say this or that. Now, I love it. And I love getting the comments because I think, at least you're interacting with me. If you don't like it so much, you don't need to follow. So I think the message to anybody watching this, based on what you've told me and my own experience, is actually go with the flow. If you're passionate about something and you're knowledgeable about something, don't worry if it's not quite perfect. Get the message out there and be consistent, which I really like.
100%.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question about you.
Okay.
You are a woman in business.
Yep.
You are a successful woman in business. And although you hold a high-ranking position in a business, you also host a podcast. You're a mom. How many challenges, and perhaps what's the hardest challenge you've had to face as a woman in business?
This question is an interesting one because the UAE has proven to be a place where I personally believe, and it might be a bit controversial because other women say no. I've been through different situations, but I think every opportunity I had in my life, it was on meritocracy.
Okay, nice.
And it gone both ways. The time that I didn't get and the time that I did, but it was never based on gender. That's me and my experience.
That's actually really refreshing to hear, though. So I like the fact that you started this with, it could be a bit controversial, but what you're saying is you've gotten to where you are because of who you are, not necessarily because you played the female card.
No, absolutely. And in fact, I probably, if it was a race between a man and a woman, I think we do get some extra bonus sometimes, you know. I remember when I arrived in the UAE, and I was thinking about this today. I went to one of the telecoms, and at the time things were not so much online, so you have to queue up. And I was so happy to see, there's a woman queue here. Let's go this way, you know. And that's what the UAE is about, you know. I think there's a lot of protection in favor of women. However, I also understand there are other, you know, people have faced different, you know, in different organizations, different situations, which are very, very real.
Yeah.
But on a personal level, I think it was, you know, the hard work. When I fail, it's my fault. If I do well, it's also my fault. So.
And actually going back to one of your, what sounds like core values, which is actually the ability to look at yourself and say, Cecilia, have you actually aced this, or could you have done slightly better, which I like.
And you always will go back. And if you put your hand in your heart, you realize, I should have gone the extra mile, yeah.
I like that you can do that, though, because not many people can admit that.
No.
Honestly. With that in mind, then, would you say that you've had any mentors that have helped you along the way? And what is it about having a mentor that has helped you in your career?
I've met a great amount of people through my career. And yes, I have many people who helped or lead the way or giving advice that were fruitful. And even the people who maybe at that moment you thought they did something wrong, or, you know, it was still a learning experience, you know. As long as you take everything within, even the bad experience, and don't hold against and just move on, that's really the way to go for me.
Sound advice. Let's bring things to a close and just talk about the fact that for you being successful in business, as you say, it's been based on meritocracy. You prefer people to be authentic. Yeah. And I guess if you are authentic, you expect the same in return. Yeah. You like people to be consistent. You like people to self-review.
Lots of rules for me.
But I actually think it's really important. Let's not use rules because it sounds too formal.
Yeah, exactly.
But if we just say that there is a general framework that you seem to operate your lifestyle within, which is to show up, which is to be quite hard on yourself, but also be kind on yourself when things go well. Because it's all about that self-review, evolving, being better today than you were yesterday. I actually think it's sound advice because we've spoken about the fact that there are so many people coming here, and perhaps me and my team are responsible for a lot of those people coming to Dubai with the rate at which Allsop and Allsop are growing. But that's indicative of a lot of real estate firms at the moment. And so I think anything that we can do to educate new people coming to Dubai and the wider Emirates is important, because 1,000 people coming to Dubai is great, but 1,000 people that don't really know what they're doing coming to Dubai could be a little bit difficult. And I think it's important for people who have a voice and an authority online to share feedback and guidance and advice, right?
But if you look to what's coming, how the UAE is developing, I think the stakes are quite clear to what customers also want. In a market that is saturated with agents, how do you position yourself apart, right? I think there is still very minimal understanding when it comes to what customer service is and customer experience is. And today I see many great companies acing, call it, the customer service part, where they have a great journey, they are great with listings, they're great closing the deal. So they do, you know, they tick all the boxes. They do a great service, they get good reviews. But the question is, what's next? And I think for me, what's next is experience. How you make your customer feel. And that's where I think people need to put their attention. Because it's building connections that are meaningful is what's going to give you referrals, is what's going to change the way you do business. And it's not about spending money, it's about listening. I think, you know, salespeople love to speak on top of customers or not listening or not being prepared to a meeting. Sometimes they are baseline prepared. They don't come ready for a conversation, right? And by listening, you know, picking up those moments where maybe the customer say, yo, my daughter, you know, just finished school and, you know, at the day of the deal, you know, bring a little present that resonates. It's just those small extra things, right? Yeah. And you see that on the hospitality industry. And here in the UAE, the hotels are amazing. And every time you have an experience, I'm sure when you finish that experience, you go home, you tell, oh, I spent a weekend on this hotel, this is what happened. So you share with other people. But the same way, people are going to also share when they have a bad experience.
So true.
So I think going back to many of the points you raise, as a new agent or entering the market, you really need to focus on the experience. Because I ask this question all the time, what do you prefer, 100 leads or 100 referrals? I know the answer.
Totally. I would always take the 100 referrals.
So
then let's end the podcast with a company or an organization which you think is acing the customer experience.
Obviously, I have to say Aldar for obvious reasons. But I think there are many, right? I don't want to call it the name. I think the UAE is the place of innovation where people are driving. They want to get things. There's never a satisfaction moment because we always have to keep going. And I think that is the key, right? Also obviously. And by the way, I just listed my property with you guys.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing how your experience is.
Yes, I am very...
Are you happy so far?
Yeah, very happy so far. I really like the tech and the updates on the viewings.
Yes.
I normally don't see that from other brokers. So that's the process part, getting it correct. Let's see the customer experience when we are finished.
Well, there we go. So basically we're acing customer experience with Aldar and we're acing customer experience with Allsop and Allsop. Cecilia, we're out of time, but I feel like we could talk forever.
No, feel free.
There's so many things that we could talk about, but I'm going to say thank you very much for your time today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
See you.